from trained worker and raise the capabilities of their work, which is evident in the protocol through Article 14, related to free movement of workers, and nationals of member states have the right to seek work and acceptance without discrimination in any other member state accordance with the law of the host country, as well as Article 19 concerning the possibility of transferring social security benefits for nationals of member state to another member state to guarantee the rights of workers in a way that reflects full integration among African countries. The second part will be about political motives, where regional grouping are embodiment of the content's ability to confront external pressure and achieve political independence for African countries, where the weakness and fragility of some African countries can be faced through their presence in the economic and political bloc that seek to prevent the fall and failure of that states through integration at all security and political and social levels through settlement of many African conflicts according to African solution and vision. The part of social and cultural motives for regional integration. It is to create an African identity and natural by promoting African culture and strengthening effort to teach major African language to facilitate communication of the African people without colonizer language. The African content also needs to enhance investment in building school and training institutes and universities that reflect the national and African identity. That which is what reinforced the free movement protocol through Article 13 on the free movement of students and researchers to obtain education and conduct research in the member states without harassment and with facilitating the produce. Finally, promoting economic development by creating a strong legal environment that helps attract capital according to modern legal methods that are flexible and fast, instead of traditional litigation methods that are subject to national law in each country, which thus consume a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashwan. Thank you very much for your presentation. Dr. Mohammed Fouad Rashwan, he's a PhD holder in African study, researcher in African affairs, and also he's the ambassador in AUYF-TMOPA, the African Union campaign to promote the protocol of free movement of persons in Africa. And after the conference, I will share with you the presentation of Dr. Rashwan, the definition of regional integration, also the economic motives for the regional integration, and why African Union and the African movement. Today, we are advocating for ACFTA and the protocol of free movement of person, because in our path for a real integration, economic integration, political integration, to see Africa at one continent, at one country, one language, one dream, one future, we need to advocate first for African free trade zone and free movements of persons, of individuals in our continent. Because if we really believe that we all come from the same land, we do have the right to circulate, to move in our proper land without any restrictions. I will ask Professor Buthaina to give us her perspective from her human rights defender view. Dr. Buthaina, what do you think about migration?
Yes.
Over to you.
Actually, from a perspective of human rights or in general a legal perspective, I think that it is important to implement the free movement protocol. But in Tunisia, for example, it is necessary to harmonize our national laws and policies in accordance with the free movement implementation roadmap, and build the capacities of different stakeholders for prompt facilitation of free movement. In Tunisia, the situation of migration is a little bit difficult. There is restrictive or limited legal framework of migration in Tunisia. I should first of all present some statistics, some important statistics. We know that Tunisia is an important country of migrant origin and transit, but it has also become a country of destination during the last few years. Especially since the early 2000s. And as you know, following the situation of instability and humanitarian crisis in Libya and Syria, and the political unrest in the sub-Saharan Africa, precisely in Côte d'Ivoire, there has been a change in the profile of migration in Tunisia. Since then, Tunisia has refugees and asylum seekers, around 9,500, especially or mostly from Côte d'Ivoire and Syria, and non-status asylum seekers. For migrants, it is estimated that Tunisia hosts approximately 58,990 migrants in 2021, including 21,466 sub-Saharan migrants and more than 10,000 irregular sub-Saharan migrants. The sub-Saharan migrants are concentrated especially in Tunis, Sfax, and Medellin, considered as the main migration hubs for these migrants. There are different motives for going to Tunisia or choosing Tunisia as destination, like looking for sustainable livelihoods and higher education. Some other factors, such as visa exemption for nationals of several sub-Saharan countries, which makes Tunisia an attractive destination of sub-Saharan migrants. But really, the legal framework of migration, and even after the revolution and the beginning of the transition to democracy, there has been an attempt to improve the migration governance in Tunisia. The protection of the rights of migrants and asylum seekers is included in the 2016-2020 National Migration Strategy document and is considered as one of the strategic objectives for managing migration. However, attempts for legal reforms, such as the elaboration of draft law on asylum and rights-based national migration strategy, were cut short in 2013 due to the increase of political and economic problems, especially the political assassinations in 2013 in Tunisia and the growing tension in Libya. As to asylum, there's a more protective or more ratification of international conventions and regional conventions protecting refugees. In Tunisia, for example, Tunisia is signatory to the Geneva 1951 Convention of Refugees and its protocol, 1967 protocol. It has also ratified the 1969 Organization of African Unity Convention, governing specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa. We have the Article 26 of the Tunisian Constitution, which guarantees political asylum, including the principle of non-refoulement. However, and thanks to the efforts of international organizations and national civil society organizations, of course, with collaboration with governmental actors, there is a better protection of refugees or of refugee rights in Tunisia, especially through facilitating the procedures of their social and economic inclusion and providing them with more services such as legal assistance and social security and health insurance. In June 2020, we have the first Sudanese refugee obtained a card of social security after being registered within the National Social Security Fund. This is an important step, but concerning the migrants or migration, there is a limited legal framework concerning migration in Tunisia. First of all, Tunisian law does not have any definition of the concept of migrant. It does not recognize, therefore, the judicial status of migrant, and it does not contain any specific text on the protection of migrants' rights. Nevertheless, migrants are included under the category of foreigners and subject to the law of 1968 on the condition of foreigners, which stipulates rules on entry and stay of migrants, as well as the related sanctions for breach of these rules. Among the applicable laws, also, we can mention the law of 1975 relating to passports and travel documents. These laws are related to foreigners, not especially to migrants. The governmental decree of 2018 completing the governmental decree of 26 September 2017 fixing the tariffs of chancery fees. This law has, or this decree has, a special advantage, especially for the victims of human trafficking. They can be exempted from paying the overstay penalties. We have also the 2016 organic law preventing and combating trafficking in persons, and the 2080 law against racial discrimination. The limited legal framework, in addition to the restrictive national policy regarding migration, make the access of migrants to their rights, especially social and economic rights, difficult in Tunisia. Among these rights, we can mention the right of residence, the right to work, the right to health. We have in Article 38 of the Tunisian Constitution in recognition of the right of health for every human being, the right of access to justice, and the right to education. For instance, there is a difficult access to the right to work, especially in the formal sector, due to the restrictive Tunisian labor law. It is necessary to notice that Tunisia has not ratified the 2003 International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all migrant workers and members of their families. Moreover, work authorization is required, and the authorization is granted on the basis of several criteria, including the non-existence of Tunisian skills in the sector of activity concerned by the recruitment. Here we notice a national preference. We have some problems Sub-Saharan migrants face some major challenges in Tunisia, including namely the limited legal framework governing migration and guaranteeing their rights, the absence of a clear and inclusive national strategy for migration, the difficult procedures and legal restrictions slowing down and sometimes preventing the access of migrants to their social and economic rights, such as the right to work. The difficult access to work in the formal sector causes the increase of number of sub-Saharan migrants working in informal economy, especially agriculture, construction, and domestic work. This makes them deprived of their social rights. In addition to being confronted to tough regulation against irregular migrants, sub-Saharan migrants are victims of violence and human trafficking. But here we should notice the important role of the creation of the National Committee Against Trafficking in Persons to develop a national strategy and establish coordinated mechanisms to identify victims, care for them and protect them, and prosecute offenders. Even the migrants the sub-Saharan migrants are not excluded, and they are protected by this National Committee Against Trafficking in Person, and they are protected by the law of or the law against trafficking in persons. I think I have some suggested guidelines and practical modalities to overcome these challenges. What do you think? Should I present these suggestions now or after?
Busaina, thank you first of all for your presentations, and I have to mention that Busaina, she's one of our Pan-African advocates for the rights of sub-Saharan migrants in Tunisia. Busaina, she's expert in the field of migration law in Tunisia and North Africa, and she is a specialist in humanitarian law, and she wrote many articles about the situation of sub-Saharan migrants in Tunisia. And I met her at the Arab Institute for Human Rights back home in my country, and I knew her. She's a Pan-African, and she's work. Mainly her work is to spotlight the situation of sub-Saharan migrants in Tunisia. Well, I suggest that we take your recommendations after the presentation of Dr. Brown. Jean-Baptiste, he's saying that the presentations are very informative. Thank you, Busaina, you make my day, because we North African, we always seem like people, we are not doing enough for Africa. No, Brown, today I made my province. So please, over to you, Dr. Brown. And I would love that you start with the presentations about AU, after MOPA, and what is the perspective of the campaign and the advantages of the protocol of free movement of person in Africa. Thank you. Over to you. Brown, please.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. So sorry about that. My apologies. So I was saying I'm so grateful and very thankful to be seated right here today in the midst of these great minds. I'm always delighted because I get to learn a lot, and I get to be exposed to a lot of data and a lot of information. Dr. Rashwan, I see you. And to Dr. Credis, I don't want to say the first name so I don't get it wrong. So I see, I'm very delighted to be on the same platform with you people. So about the protocol and the free movement of persons in Africa, it has been one of the documents that has given life to a lot of thoughts, and a lot of people like me, who have always been Pan-Africanist from the beginning. And when I came in contact with the protocol, and it kind of explained why Africa needs to be where it wants to be. Let me put it like that, where it wants to be. So the protocol on the free movement of persons in Africa actually started in 1991 in Abuja, when the focus of the OAU shifted from liberation to the economic integration. So African countries committed to the establishment of an African Economic Community. Basically, the African Economic Community Treaty, commonly known as the Abuja Treaty, officially came into force in 1994. The free movement of persons, right of residence, and right of establishment by Africans across the borders of AU member states are included in Article 4.2 of that treaty. So I would want to say that this treaty actually got live let me put it like this, that in 2016 in Kigali, Rwanda, the African passport was launched. So we have to understand that there are so many, there are things or tools or pathways or implementation plans for the free movement of persons in Africa. So first, the free movement of persons in Africa is seeking to take away barriers in Africa. For example, if you've heard, it is very easy for someone to travel, for an African to travel to a European country or an American country than travel to another country in Africa. This, in all ramification, isn't what it should be. Because if we want to look at Africa as a continent, Africa as a community, Africa as one house, oneness, we need to understand that Africa should be a place where an African should be able to move from a certain country to another country without certain restrictions. Now, when we talk about the free movement of persons in Africa, a lot of people express fears, a lot of things they feel is going to affect Africa, especially in the time where Africa is facing a lot of insecurities and problems, border issues and all of that. But we have to understand that Africa, the free movement of persons in Africa, is not seeking to remove the borderlines of Africa in its reality, but it is seeking to remove the restriction that is causing Africans not to be able to move from where they are. For example, you would want to go to school. You would want to have maybe products to sell. You might have a business meeting. The truth is, with the free movement of persons in Africa protocol being ratified and becoming functional and becoming active in Africa, an African would be able to move from Egypt to Tunisia without having to look for a visa. So it seeks to remove the visa requirements in African countries for Africans. So it wants to allow Africans to be able to move from certain countries or countries of origin to other countries, to be able to reside there, to be able to establish there, and to be able to do or conduct business freely. With the African passport, we have to know that this is going to be possible, and it is one of the tools that the free movement of persons in Africa is seeking to use to remove this. Every one of us have our different country passport, but imagine that in time to come, when the free movement of persons in Africa is ratified, you no more need probably rely on your country's passport. What will you be relying on? Basically, on the African passport. Every African will use one passport. Every African will be, identified as an African before you are identified as an Egyptian or as a Tunisian or as a Nigerian or as a Ghanaian. If you go to the European countries, we all know the structure or the architecture of in Europe. Basically, when you talk about the European passport. We know that there are countries under the European Union. And these countries, before you even think about the countries in the European Union, you first of all identify a European by the name a European, right? Before you even talk about, oh, this person is from Belgium, this person is from France, this person is from here, you first of all identify that person as a European or as an American. So we have to come to that realization that the protocol seeks to remove that barrier. It seeks to bring us closer to each other. It is an economic unifier. It is something that will lead the continent into a place of togetherness, where we do not need to, be far away from each other. The other time I was talking on in an event, and I told people, I said, look, if we had the opportunity to be able to wake up in the country that we are right now and be able to say, okay, I want to travel to South Africa tomorrow, and without having to look for how to bring or look for stamps on our passport or look for visas before we can move. It will be very easy for goods, services. It will be very easy for the economic stance of Africa to be lifted. In that sense, you would have a business meeting in Egypt and you'll be able to leave. For example, your business partner calls you today and says, hey, look, we need to meet tomorrow. And you're like, okay, we'll meet tomorrow in Egypt. And you're able to move instantly without a visa to Egypt to hold your business meeting. It becomes something that, would make whatever you are going to do in that country viable, because you won't have to go from office to office. Like, for example, in Nigeria, before you're able to get a visa to any country in Africa, you switch. You have to walk from buildings to buildings, from this to this, and all of that. That is what the free movement of persons in Africa seeks to remove. I will talk more on this when questions starts coming in. I don't want to, we've already taken a lot of time with presentations and all of that, but I just wanted to take us a little bit into what the free movement of persons in Africa is. So you need to think about the fact that the African passport is one of that instruments that will bring free movement of persons in Africa into, to reality. And that the free movement of persons in Africa is one of the 10 flagship projects of the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. And 4 countries has already ratified this protocol. We need 11 countries more. So basically we need 15 countries to ratify this protocol for it to go into force. 4 countries have already done that. We need 11 more countries to make this happen. So that is why we're sitting here. That is why at AUYAF Temupa, we're doing what we're doing. The Youth Ambassadors for the Free Movement of Persons in Africa is pushing for the ratification of this protocol. And we are basically given the mandate to sensitize, promote, and popularize this protocol amongst youths in Africa and also in diaspora. Don't forget that diaspora now is being called the 4th region of Africa because of its contribution to Africa. So it is necessary that we bring these people into the economic realities of Africa. So I would love to stop here and continue later. Thank you so very much, Maha. Over to you. You're muted, Maha.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brown, for your input. Dr. Brown, he's the leader and the founder of African Union Ambassador of Free Movement of Persons in the continent. He's expert in digital transformation and digital technology. And I'm really honored today to have you on board and to spotlight in your efforts in advocating for free movement of persons in the continent. Well, I would love to hear questions from our leaders. And if you want to ask anything, to ask, to give comments, please raise your hand and I will give you the floor. I think Jean-Baptiste Simbo, he said one different aspects, including free movement. The reality is that the commitments made often remain at the level of good speeches. Please, over to you, Jean-Baptiste. I'd love to hear your feedback. Hello? Jean.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, John. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much for the speech. I'm Jean-Baptiste Simbo from Burundi. I'm a legal representative of SIAD. SIAD, it's a civil society organization which work in the area of governance, leadership, and entrepreneurship. So my point of view is that we need a free movement in Africa. As Africans, we need to feel free when we are in Tanzania, Kenya, Egypt, and somewhere else in Africa. That will allow Africans to achieve the Agenda 2063. As long as we have not yet achieved that right of movement, it will be an illusion, as I wrote it in this. Thank you very much for the floor.
Thank you, Jean. You're welcome. Thank you. Who else? Hello?
Yeah, can I go on?
Please, go on. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
To introduce yourself first.
Thank you. I'm Ngozi Uzoma from the University of Nigeria. Yeah, it's nice to have a free movement of people. Yeah, so that especially in Africa, where the socio-economic condition of people depend on border movement in terms of informal trade, households use informal trade to take care of people in the family. But my fear and fear of so many people, to Dr. Brown, is a country, a populous country in Nigeria, is afraid of what you call dumping, you know, because we have large market in Nigeria, and people might also, countries in Africa might use the loopholes provided by the free movement to dump their goods in Nigeria. What do you talk about that? And also we have this different regs, the regional economic communities. We have the ones in the Arab Maghreb. We have the one in SADC, the ECOWAS, IGAD, and all that. And these different regs, they have their different directions. You know, how do we make sure that they don't become stumbling blocks in the integration of the continent? And this one goes to Professor Kridis. Sometimes I wonder if international law is law at all, you know, because the stronger countries, they only use it when it suits them, you know, and only when it suits them. So the African migrants in Tunisia, what is the connection of their condition in Tunisia and the EU border and the migration externalization policy? And how you said you're a lawyer, a human rights activist or a human rights lawyer. What have you been doing in Tunisia to make sure that the specific things you have been doing to make sure that the well-being of those sub-Saharan migrants are not taken care of? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. Dr. Buthaina, she will be answering you, and also Dr. Brown. However, I have to give the floor to Eben, and then we will answer those questions. Eben, over to you.
Hi, I'm audible.
Hello?
Hello.
Am
I audible?
Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Right. My name's Eben Mzava. I'm the ambassador designate for Tanzania to the East African Community Youth Ambassadors Platform. Yeah, necessarily, I have a question for the good old doctor, previous speaker, and that necessarily pertains to, he talked a lot about free movement and specifically the African Union passports. I learned about the African Union passports, I think earlier on this year, and I was really excited to hear about them. But necessarily, where are they currently in the terms of their implementation? And what are some of the challenges they maybe faced in terms of its implementation? And what are some of the things that are going on the ground in order to solve those challenges?
Thank you, Orgo. Asante. Asante, Orgo. Good to hear from you. And there are Stephen, I think. Please, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Am I clear? Can I be heard?
Yes, please, over to you. And introduce yourself first.
Okay, thank you. I am Stephen Martin. I am a member of the East African Community Youth Ambassadors Platform.
Please, I can't hear you properly. Raise your, please, would you like to raise your voice? Like we cannot hear you. Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now is much better. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. I think my system was malfunctioning. So, for starters, I'd like to commend the effort. I remember back in 2018 when two young men set off from Uganda on a motorcycle in part as an advocacy mechanism for the African passport, Kenneth Owori and Victor Okoth. And, they were riding across African countries. That was just after, the Kigali conference and, that passport being given out to a couple of leaders and the fast tracking to have the passport implemented. So I commend the effort by all the young people out there that are moving to have this type of initiative implemented. I would like to ask that as we have discussions about, the passport, can we equally have commensurate discussions about some of the issues concerning travel within the African continent? Things such as, the single African air transport market, which has been an issue that of great importance about liberalizing air travel within the African continent. Are there commensurate discussions being undertaken in this effort to ensure that as we have the free passports come in, we equally have mechanisms that allow people to travel as freely as the passports would permit? Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for your inputs about the African passport. Now I will ask Dr. Brown to answer about the future of African passport, the implementation of free movement of persons in Africa, especially as we know that the protocol needs more 11 signature to get fully ratified. Please, Dr. Brown, over to you, then Dr. Buthaina. You will give us your recommendation and answer to the questions about what have been done in Tunisia for the benefits of sub-Saharan migrants. And also, I would love you to spotlight onto the role of civil society, Tunisian civil society, who stood up for the rights of sub-Saharan migrants in Tunisia, especially on the COVID lockdown 2020. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Brown, then Dr. Buthaina.
Thank you very much, Maha. Thank you to everyone that spoke. Ngozi Uzoma, thank you so very much. Eben Nzava, Thank you so very much. So let me start with Ngozi Uzoma. So yes, goods and dumping. So when we talk about the free movement of persons in Africa, we have laws, policies, and policies governing. There's an architecture governing the whole process of the free movement of persons in Africa. And there's also what we call an implementation plan. So a step-by-step implementation plan, for the free movement of persons in Africa. So yeah, goods dumping, like in Nigeria being the most populous country in Africa, etc. Now, right now, you would agree with me that a lot of that is still happening in African countries, not just Nigeria. A lot of that is still happening. And when we talk about the free movement of persons in Africa, people think that we're talking about a system where, the borders are closed, there's no more airport security, there's no more checks at the points of entry and all of that. We need to understand that when we're talking about the free movement of persons in Africa, we're talking about a situation where there are still checks. Everything still goes on the way they should. But it seeks, number one, to remove visa requirements in Africa for Africans. It seeks to remove visa requirements. And it also seeks to bring us economically, integrated. Whatever checks has been going on, and let me bring this as a privileged information, that over the past few years or months, when this thing began, when the free movement of persons in Africa protocol or ratification and implementation, we haven't gotten to the point of implementation yet, because that has not, we haven't gotten the number of ratifications that we're looking for. But there has been a lot of meetings. For example, just last year, there was a security meetings of all the security apparatus in Africa. It was hosted in a certain country. That seeks to show that there is a serious implementation plan on ground, both security, both goods, services, persons, and all of that. There are meetings going on planning, on strategies, and putting the necessary policies in place to be able to, handle whatever will come. So the ideas of this meeting is we look into the future. What is it about? How do we see this, happening? How can we curtail the things that are supposed to happen, especially when people exert the fears, the fears of insecurity. Right now, there's still insecurity. For example, I mentioned about 4 countries that has ratified the protocol, because I want to make an analogy here. Rwanda has, Niger has, Sao Tome and Principe has, and Mali has. Now, let's take Rwanda. Rwanda has ratified the protocol, and already it has visa on arrival for people, for all African countries. The truth is, are we having insecurities in Rwanda? No, we're not, because the right security apparatus and whatever is needed is in place, has been put in place. Yes, are they still having issues as a country? Yes, they do. But are they taking the right steps towards this? They are doing it. So when we talk about the free movement of persons in Africa, we're talking about countries around Africa coming together, putting their heads together, to look for a viable solutions to some of the issues we have. Because you will agree with me that if the free movement of persons in Africa comes into play and one country decides to stay off, putting his or her head together to make sure that some issues on security are solved, it will come to affect everyone. Let's talk about, for example, take Boko Haram, for example. If Nigeria and the bordering countries of Nigeria are not putting their heads, together in the issues of Boko Haram, we won't even have the victories that we're recording, presently. I know a lot of people will say we're not recording victories or, other things like that, but we are. We have to understand that we are. It is a process. So, yes, goods and countries like Nigeria becoming a dumping ground, there are already policies, there are already issues, there are already, plans to cater for all these issues. So the next question is how to make sure that regs don't become stumbling blocks for this. I want to let every one of us in this meeting know that the regs are part and parcel of what is going on in the free movement of persons in Africa. There was a meeting last year which I was part of, and we had all the regs here, the Maghreb and East Africa, ECOWAS, SADC, all of them, they were there in that meeting. And what were we talking about? The free movement of persons in Africa. So there is no way, or there is no point where the regs are going to be, as stumbling blocks. At that meeting, the resolution or whatever input was coming in was positive to the fact that everyone is putting their hands together to make sure that the free movement of persons in Africa becomes a reality. So there is no stumbling block by any reg and all of that. So I would love to move to Eben. I just hope that I have given some insight into the question of Ngozi.
Don't have time, please.
Yes, I'm trying to rush it. Okay. So
Yeah, right.
Let me go to Eben. So where are we currently with the African passport? So currently, the African passports, the structure of the African passport is done with the design. Everything is done with. At the security meeting that I talked about, it was one of the things that was discussed was the African passport. So the security checks, everything that is necessary for the African passport to be accepted by all countries were looked at, were assessed by the securities personnel in Africa at that meeting. So right now it is ready and it's just waiting to be rolled out. It is just waiting to be rolled out, and everything is settled. So what is the issue they are facing? Well, we're not facing any issue on the passport at this particular time because, certain countries are, in agreement with the passport. They are in agreement with the passport. And yes, we might have the issue of funding. Yeah. That's the issue. There might be an issue of funding, and then what are they doing? So we're looking, so much into the issue of funding by each country in Africa to be able to issue this passport to their citizens when it is rolled out. Thank you so very much, Maha.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you for your for your insightful inputs. Dr. Buthaina, over to you.
As I told you, even though in Tunisia there is no a specific legal framework or legislative or legal framework and restrictive policy regarding the situation or the protection of migrants, but the role of civil society and international organizations, especially UNHCR and the International Organization for Migration, which work in partnership with national organizations. The role of civil society organizations is important because they try to do programs and advocate for the protection of migrants' rights through, for example, building the capacities of governmental actors, ministries, to and sensitize them of the importance of protecting migrants' rights, including sub-Saharan migrants. We have also the provision of different services like legal assistance, for example, for sub-Saharan migrants, raising awareness activities through doing cultural events and cultural activities, gathering Tunisians or Tunisian citizens with sub-Saharan migrants in order to guarantee the inclusion of sub-Saharan migrants in the Tunisian society. I want to emphasize the important role of civil society organizations and even the Tunisian government during the COVID-19 crisis regarding migrants, refugees, and especially sub-Saharan migrants in Tunisia. There are this period was characterized by the assistance for migrants, sub-Saharan migrants during the COVID-19 in numerous Tunisian regions through by delivering food, hygiene items to vulnerable refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants, including sub-Saharan migrants, by the Tunisian Red Crescent, the Tunisian Scout, and different civil society organizations in different regions of Tunisia, like Sfax, Tataouine, Jerba, that means in the south and in the north, and even in the middle of Tunisia, through voluntary committees coordinating with the Tunisian Council for Refugees. All these organizations or all these associations work with national associations such as unknown national associations in the regions. They are in proximity with vulnerable migrants. We had also some new collaborations or some important attempts to protect migrants through the collaboration between an organization of human rights, a Tunisian organization of human rights, which is the Tunisian Human Rights League, which collaborated with the municipality of Sousse and some regional associations to provide necessary in-kind and financial assistance to vulnerable refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants in a governorate in Tunisia, which is Sousse. This governorate included or includes several migrants, especially sub-Saharan migrants. We have also I should also mention the inclusion of migrants and refugees, asylum seekers also in the national strategy in Tunisia. So they are considered as the vulnerable citizens. There was an emphasis of the principle of non-discrimination between Tunisian citizens and non-citizens, especially refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants, and the importance of providing the latter with better access to public health services in light of the exceptional circumstances. The government also called on citizens to accept late payments or of rent and other monies where people's livelihoods had been affected. This is the case of different sub-Saharan migrants. And the Tunisian government has also launched an online platform for civil society and international organizations to provide details of refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants needing assistance, so they can be included in the national assistance program. even though these actions or these activities of solidarity are very important during the COVID-19, there was no distinction or no discrimination between Tunisian or vulnerable Tunisian citizens and other non-citizens or refugees and sub-Saharan migrants. It is important to create a special national strategy, an inclusive national strategy, starting by a protective legal framework for these sub-Saharan migrants. I want to suggest some guidelines or some practical modalities to overcome the challenges of migration or the challenges that sub-Saharan migrants face in Tunisia. These modalities or guidelines are of substantial legal, political, social, and cultural order. I summarized these modalities in the following points. They need to adopt.
Professor, if you could conclude in 3-4 minutes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Thank you.
This is my conclusion. They need to adopt a coherent migration legal framework. They need to improve the social and economic inclusion of sub-Saharan migrants through a more inclusive national strategy, fostering visa-free entry for all sub-Saharan migrants. They need to facilitate the procedures of having residence permit. They need to develop programs to facilitate exchange of students and researchers. They need to implement the free movement protocol through harmonizing national laws and policies in accordance with the implementation roadmap of the free movement, as well as building the capacities of different stakeholders for prompt facilitation of the free movement. They need to change the narrative about migration in Tunisia and try to convince parliamentarians about the necessity of legal and legislative reforms in favor of migrants' rights, the need for civic engagement to foster an appreciation of the free movement benefits and counter xenophobia, the importance of civil society, the important role of civil society through the advocacy for migrant rights and non-discrimination on the basis of nationality, race, ethnic group, color, sex, language, etc., and providing legal assistance and raising awareness of Tunisian people in order to accept migrants and promote their inclusion in the Tunisian society. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Unfortunately, our host Maha had to drop. She had internet challenges, but she had done her job and she had done it well. I thank everyone that has managed to keep with us, and for those of us that have been following very keenly, it's even very clear comments that everyone very great, very informative, speaking from a position of knowledge and facts, which is something that we value and which is something that young people should always strive to. I want to thank all our panelists for coming through and for vehemently and heavily sharing information and content that was indeed relevant to the topic of discussion. We here at Untitled Africa and the East African Community Youth Ambassadors platform are looking forward to that time when we shall have one young Africa united, but not curtailed by borders and the restrictions that come with. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone. Unfortunately, this is all the time we had for today's Unplugged series. Mercy, if you could mute yourself. Thank you. We usually run the Unplugged series for just an hour from 7 to 8. Today it is 23 minutes in, and our people are still very happy to continue with the series. Otherwise, I unfortunately need to end it here. Again, thank you so much to our panelists and to all of you that have managed to stay with us for the whole time we were here. And Ange, if you would like to send us off with a song, we'll be happy to, but please feel free to leave at will.